Welcome to Vale La Pena. In English, that's worth your while. I'm your host, Cynthia Rebus. This is a show where we get to do some grassroots philanthropy together. In all episodes, we'll feature nonprofit organizations engaged in inspiring projects for people, animals, and the environment. Some guests will be representatives of those organizations, and they'll share with us more about initiatives they're working on and ways we can participate. Check the show notes for opportunities to impact these humanitarian causes together. You can find this show through my website at www.rebuslegal.com and on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Now, please join me for Vale La Pena. Hello, and welcome to Vale La Pena. I'm Cynthia Rebus. I'm your host. And if you're new here, our show is committed to grassroots philanthropy. We aim to support humanitarian causes for people, animals, and the environment. So how do we do that? Very simply, we have amazing guests, and today's going to be no exception. And we talk about things that are worth our while. The name Vale La Pena is that in Spanish. In English, that means worth your while. And it is our intent that this time together is worth yours. Today's guest. So here's how we do it. We talk about all kinds of interesting topics. And in the show notes, we always spotlight a nonprofit. Today's nonprofit is the World Children's Foundation. We'll get more about that in a little bit. But first, I want to introduce our amazing guest. Her name is Madeleine Salenius. She is coming to us from Sweden. So we're so grateful she's there at night. And she is a global communications executive and so much more, and a very dear friend. And let's bring her on for more.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Hello, Madeleine. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So nice to be on your show. Thank you.
I am honored. I am so honored. And so today, we want to talk a little bit about the environment and things that we can do. And one of the things, here in the U.S., we're always looking at these lists about the countries where the people are the happiest, right? And the U.S., we never make it in the top 10. We're never there. And then the folks that are always in the top 10 are the Scandinavian countries. Like I was reading recently, Finland has been top for the last 6 years. And in fact, the New York Times has a really interesting article about what the Finnish think about that for them, it's kind of pressure. And maybe they'd like to not be that first spot because they feel like if they complain about anything, they're not allowed to because they're supposed to be the happy people. And I know that happiness is a whole other topic, but you guys are way up there, and there's some things that you are doing that I just think would be fun to talk about some differences, whether or not it means, I do not believe happiness is just a little smiley face. I think there are deeper issues there when it comes to like joy and what really makes us happy as human beings. But it's interesting how different societies set up their worlds. And so with regard to environment, tell us a little bit about what's different there, since I know you've traveled all over, in particular, spent lots of time in the US.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that strikes me is that we use bicycles as transportation here every day, going to work, just going out to dinner, meeting friends. It's a way of life, and it's also a good way to get out, to exercise, and it's very natural. We do take trains and buses, and I think we are all inspired to commute that way as much as we can, to not drive cars and so on. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, of course you have timetables, you need to consider, and you are sharing space with other people. Um, but we're also very used to it in that sense. So and then you also don't have the parking issue when you commute that way. So I think, and also to remind everyone, I live in Sweden, and it rains a lot, and it's pretty cold a lot of the time. But yeah, we just dress for the weather, I guess.
Well, on the cars, I remember I had the great opportunity this past summer of visiting you in your beautiful city and country. And among other things, we hopped a little train that was impeccably clean, took us 20 minutes. I mean, it was like even the station was impeccably clean. It was unbelievable. And the next thing you know, we're in Copenhagen, we're in Denmark, which I just thought was thrilling that in 20 minutes you can hop countries like that to
Yeah.
do none other than go to an Ed Sheeran concert because, of course, we're big fans. We have to see Ed. And what really surprised me getting there was that nobody came by cars. Like it wasn't like here in the US where you can buy VIP parking or something like that. No, there was no parking. You either had to walk there, take that tram, the commuter train, or
Hmm.
bicycle, as you were saying. The bicycles
Yep.
were definitely there.
Yeah.
I thought it
I
was
mean,
fantastic.
it's very practical. Like you don't have the parking issue. When you are, going to a concert, maybe you want to have one drink or two, then you don't have to consider, that you have to be sober when you get in the car and drive back home. All of those things, that are very practical in that sense. Plus, it goes faster as well, and it's cheaper as well. Because especially if you go from Sweden to Denmark, you have the border, and you have to pay the fee and everything. So and yeah, the trains run fairly. They go about I think every 20 minutes, so that it's pretty good. And then later in the night, about once every hour between Sweden and Denmark. And I think most of our trains and buses they run that way. So I mean, even if you work nighttime, there are a lot of people working at the airport, for instance. They commute also by trains and buses.
Yeah, we had a very memorable night because it just so happens, of course, because it was Ed Sheeran and it was such a mob getting out of there. And all those people from Denmark and wherever they flew in to see Ed, singing his songs. Not all of them fit on the train. So you and I actually got to take sort of a midnight hike to the next
Yeah.
station. And it was safe and beautiful. And I will remember it as long as I live. But I remember one thing you told me in that visit was you were explaining to me that yes, sometimes you definitely are in your car, you drive your car, but that actually it's sort of shunned. You think hard about whether you need to actually take the car and whether or not there might be an alternative.
Yeah, that is true, and I think that's a way that society is built up to really be mindful of not overusing the car, thinking of the environment in that aspect, and also that it's a little bit also thought as if you're using the car and if you're using it by yourself, it's almost like shame on you for doing it if you don't have if you're just going down a couple of streets. um, it's just not really a part of our nature here.
I think we lost you.
Yeah, sorry.
Something happened.
Okay. No, I think
Oops.
a part of the way of living here is that you don't take the car if you're going down, a couple of blocks. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a lot, of course, yeah, you take the car if you need to. But and we also have these, cargo bikes. They're very very popular.
Oh, so you can
Um,
pack things
you
in.
Oh yeah, you can take that. I see a lot of people, even if they don't have their kids with them, they pack them with groceries, everything that they need.
That's great. Well, and then in terms of like, again, just reading statistics, it looks like there's just other aspects of um, the social structure that lend themselves perhaps to people. Talk a little bit about people's sort of relationship with government services.
Oh, yeah. Are you thinking about commuting now as well?
Well, if there is something related to commuting, but otherwise just other aspects, just sort of in terms of, because even back to what I was saying when I was reading, like what makes these Scandinavian folks so happy, it seems like some of it has to do with um, the social services and their relationship with the government. Not like I'm thinking everything's perfect and there aren't
No.
issues. And, of course, there are issues. Here in the U.S., anytime it's political season, we get to hear, definitely on the progressive side, a whole slate of things that we're trying to implement. For example, healthcare and things that are completely taken for granted for you. But for us, there
Yeah.
would be a big change in how we do things. So I was thinking it'd be helpful if you would like pick off some of those
Oh, yeah.
differences in terms of um, social services.
I think one of the big ones is education here. Um, I think that also that you have free education. You can study at university. You don't have to, have any, how do you say, any savings for that. You do get a beneficial student loan from the government if you want, but you also get actually a pay, a small pay though, but still every month
So you're
if you
paid to be
study.
a student in college?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So no,
Wow.
I did that, and then I worked part-time jobs. So I didn't need any student loans. So
And then you're saying there's no tuition or there's a modest tuition?
there's no
So your
tuition.
expenses are just your living expenses.
Yep, that
Okay.
is that is your yeah. So I think that takes a lot of weight off the parents also, because you know that you don't have to save up for the kids' college. Um, it doesn't matter which social, background, status background you have, as long as your grades are good and your attendance is up in school. You have such an amazing possibility to educate yourself and make a good life for you. So I think it's all up to the individual what kind of life they want to have. I'm not saying that being educated gives you a better life, but hopefully it opens more doors and probably to a very secure future.
And so you have, in generally, a more percentage-wise, a more educated population because it's straightforward for people to get their degrees. I mean,
Yeah,
if they apply themselves, they don't have this other block of they can't afford it.
no, and I think maybe that's also one reason to why we have a very big middle class. And the other fact is also, I think we're fairly ahead when it comes to equality, and I mean it's some of that is due to how the parental leave is structured. We have 15 months in total, for each child, and the dad must take out at least 90 days out of those. I mean, and usually the parents try to split it in half, so they each take half of the parental leave. Meaning that when someone hires you, then they maybe don't look as much as, okay, is she going to be pregnant, or is he, because it doesn't matter. It can be the man that stays home the entire, well, not the entire time, but most of the time as well.
And so you're saying there's not stigma against men for
No.
taking time, that in fact they have to take time for their newborns, for their children.
Yes, they have
Wow.
to.
Yeah,
Within,
that's
yeah. And also when it comes to sick leave, when the child is sick, it's equal there as well. It's just as common that the men are home with a sick child. So I think it gives women more freedom in that sense. Um, and I think it also takes off the pressure of the man being, the breadwinner in the family, because yeah, not always, but usually, I mean, it's pretty equal in that sense.
well, and a lot of sort of child centric, which I just want to then take a moment to say something about the nonprofit that we're featuring today, which is the Global Children's Foundation, which actually the World Childhood Foundation, sorry. We're going to link up in the show notes the actual website. And as I understand it, it was founded by Her Majesty Queen Silvia. Um, and, I have to just say this because I think maybe for listeners, it's obvious you and I are friends, and we are friends, and we've been friends for a long time. And to me, you are the true Princess Madeleine. I know there's another
Oh,
Madeleine, but you will
oh yeah.
always be the real Princess Madeleine for me.
Oh, thank you. That was so sweet.
But then, of course,
Yeah,
that's another difference, right? You guys have the constitutional monarchy.
we do.
And it is an organization that aims at preventing and supporting children who have been subject to violence in any way, in particular, any kind of sexual abuse. And there is a very strong chapter in Sweden, but they really are all over the world. And one of the things that we invite listeners to do, if they are so inclined, is to go check out that website. You can participate. You can be a corporate partner, or you can do smaller things like buy gift cards, or there's a really nice bracelet. They have a lot of different opportunities for you to participate at all levels to support children around the world. They have a strong presence in many countries now. But anyway, so you guys have great social policies to support parents with their children, especially, I guess, up
Hmm.
until a certain age or something.
Yes, you're allowed to keep your work, but you can decide if you want to work 75%, 80%, yeah, even 99% if you want, up till, it depends on which city you live in. In the city where I live, it's up until the child is 12 years old.
Okay.
So that means that you don't need to work full time. You can come home earlier, so the child doesn't need to be, in school longer while they're after school. So I think that's also since the systems are different, the making it, how do you say, yeah, more equality when it comes to parents. We have less stay at home moms here, and then we also have, the school and the nursery and everything that take care of the children. Yeah, we do. Maybe in general, the child spends less time with, let's say, the mother than if you were to be a stay-at-home mom. But over time, since you can come home earlier and so on, both the child gets to see, yeah, the parents at least a little bit more than would be normal. But you're still working, and I think it depends on who you are. Um, for me personally, it feels good to work and to, yeah, to have colleagues, and that whole part of my life. I'm not away from the workforce, but still
And
being
you're a
able to
mom.
come home. And I'm a mom,
Yeah.
and I just think it's a good balance overall. For me,
Well, and
it
it
personally works.
also sounds like you don't have so much here. A big conflict a lot of couples have is just the economics of getting child care is so
Yeah,
expensive that
yeah,
they wind up deciding it doesn't make sense for, say, the woman to work because whatever she's making is just going to childcare. So you have a
Yeah.
lot of women that just decide, okay, I'll stay at home because I'm not going to be able to generate any income because it's all going to just go to my salary is going to wind up going to pay for childcare. And it sounds like you guys have worked through some of that and you address it differently for people.
And I think, like, let's say when the children are, all grown up and you want to try to get back to the workforce, I think that can be very hard as well.
Absolutely. If you've been out of the workforce, right. To get your skills back up and even to get used to just the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
So you are a working professional and you work with an American company, but you work mostly in Sweden and sometimes travel, right?
Yep. And it does differ a little bit, and I'm still happy now that I'm working and I have a child and I'm a single mom, or single caretaker. It's actually good that we have the vacation time that we have, which is, I think we have our national holidays, but then we also have yeah, between 5 to 6 weeks. It depends on how, which kind of industry you work in, but 6 weeks of vacation and plus those additional holidays. It's also it's a lot of time off where you can just be with your family and really stress down.
Right. There's so much said about how in Europe the people seem to work to live, and here in the US we seem to get that a little backwards. We sort of live to work.
Yeah.
But we're learning, we're trying. Part of this is talking to people from other parts of the country. We really all have more in common than we have different. But it's interesting to see how a different society addresses the same kinds of human needs that we all have, right? So talking about that, talk to us a little bit about how you guys addressed the pandemic, because you got a lot of press here because you did things a little differently from many other countries.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we certainly did. I think we were the only ones were having the mask. That was just a recommendation, and if you saw anyone wearing a mask, I mean, that was oh wow, that person is wearing a mask. It was it was a little bit different, and it felt so weird because the rest of the world was panicking, and then you go and you just wait and you're like, okay, but when are we gonna panic? It felt very, very strange at that point because they were locking down. I have my siblings all live abroad, and they couldn't go out. They had to wear the mask. They had to, like most of the world, they had to go to the stores to buy groceries certain times. A lot of gyms, everything was closed down. I know you couldn't go to dance class. They had online dance classes, and I got to join. That was awesome. And here you could still go to the restaurants. My daughter was still at the nursery. I went to the store, everything as usual. I went to the gym. It was really, really actually pleasant, because I think people were, they were maybe being a little bit more mindful, and then at the same time we had this great benefit because they didn't want the companies to shut down. We didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last. I think here we were probably not being so positive and maybe more realistic, thinking that this is going to take a while. So the government actually funded a lot of companies. The companies had to, and that was my company included, had to had to submit an application and asking that the government would fund a part of our income. So we had reduced work hours. So if you were working full time, I know our company they chose so we would go down to working 16 hours per week, um, which is not a lot. So we had a lot of, but still getting almost full pay. So a lot of us did actually have a lot of time to think about what we wanted to do with our lives. Um, just de-stress, time with our, yeah, taking time with our families, working from home, um, stressing down, not commuting as well, all of those little things. So and for me, I studied, I went to the forest, just recharged in a different way. So that was actually a very, very developing time, I think. Just
Yeah, and so
pausing
I
and looking at
understand
everything.
that there were the businesses didn't shut down, so
Yeah.
you didn't have that economic impact that definitely a lot of places, certainly in the US, a lot of businesses really suffered from the shutdown. And then the 16 hours, you could do some of that from home, or were you still going into an office?
No, I did that entirely from home.
Okay.
So yeah, I for me personally, it was actually a very, very good time to reflect and to use that time to just work on self growth. That
Well, and you
was.
mentioned going to the forest. I think
Mhm.
sometimes people don't realize, like, Sweden is such an amazing, you have such amazing forests, and you're also like so many islands, right? You're on an island, you're thousands of islands. I think people sometimes don't realize that about your country. But so you had some time to reflect and um, do your internal work, right? Growth,
Mhm.
but also spend time with your loved ones. And then, of course, the real issue was the impact on in terms of the elderly and people with
Yeah.
comorbidity and anyone who really, um, you know, was in one of those more vulnerable populations. Because you remember that John Hopkins chart at the beginning, we could watch how the world was going. And definitely in terms of, I know there was all this, like so many things, pandemic related, it seemed like um, there was little agreement about it inside
Yeah.
of any given country and outside. If you compared different countries' views about how to handle it, um, but it was really interesting looking at sort of the death tolls at the beginning and then how they
Yeah.
have worked out. I mean, I happened to check that out just in prep for this call, and you definitely did better than the USA in terms of your death tolls. I do know there was some controversy in terms of your neighbors, right? Some of the
Yeah.
Scandinavian countries, they really um, they did a little better, so they had their issues, and I know they even closed borders with Sweden for a period of
Yeah.
time, right?
Yes. They did. So I was able to go over to Denmark since I have my sister living there. But I had to wear a face mask and yeah.
So
So
you
it
got a
came
little
on.
experience of what that was about when you
I
went to
did
Denmark.
get that. I did get that, and I think that's up to everyone. Whatever every individual have to do to make them feel safe. Um, and I think that it's just very difficult to not get COVID. There's so many things you have to really consider, even when taking groceries home from the store, etc. You have to really be isolated not to get it. That's my personal opinion, and I think that's also probably what our government was thinking, that everyone is probably get going to be infected sooner or later.
Well, right. It seems like the thinking was really to allow natural herd immunity
Yeah.
to take place, and then instead of other countries that actually mandated policies, lockdowns and mask wearing, etc. Sweden actually made it more recommendations, and then people chose what made sense given, their own the age and health and other factors in their life.
Yeah, and I think also the stress that it can cause if you're under lockdown. I haven't been under it, so I can only imagine. But I mean, I can also imagine how difficult that must be, and also what it does to actually, your sleep and your stress levels in total, and just to have that stress around you constantly.
It was incredibly strange. And, here from Los Angeles, where I'm used to a lot of humanity, we did have policies for you could take certain trips, like to the grocery store. And it was strange to have no traffic. And the isolation has been, I mean, that was actually a little benefit to drive around LA if you were on, an errand that was legit. But it was a sad time to see restaurant after restaurant and business after business get boarded up, because as the pandemic drug on, you saw that, companies just couldn't survive that way. And yeah, there were different aid packages to assist certain companies, but the landscape of LA now is very different than what it was pre-pandemic, in terms of just shops that have had to close. And then more seriously, the isolation impact. We already had an isolation issue, a lot of people that are shut in and not very engaged in any communities. So we've had all kinds of spikes in terms of suicides, and addiction of every type. As people turned to substances to help them deal with pain, with getting through just how strange it was, and definitely at the elderly, it was more acute, because if you were in a nursing home, for example, your loved ones couldn't come visit you, or if they were allowed to visit you, they had to visit you from outside the window, like they could stand in the courtyard. So it was a very difficult chapter for pretty much everyone. It stopped whatever it is you were up to. You had to rethink it, right? Because it probably wasn't going to happen, and definitely not on the schedule that you thought. And then there had to be all this space between people. So if some version was going to happen, it was going to be a very pared down version with people standing far away from each other. Yeah, it was really
The one thing that
to not have had to go through that.
yeah, no, but the one thing that I mean I did suspect, and I did get confirmation from doctors, is because I heard rumors that they were giving morphine to the elderly people that got um, COVID, and just that may have caused them, to die. Maybe they would have died anyway, but less suffering. But yeah, I know that there have been instructions to do that. So yeah.
Yes, I have seen some controversial, some of the controversy around how Sweden's caretakers were handling the elderly. And but it's interesting. It's interesting how after time passes, what I know that people are still arguing that, and they're going to argue that, I think, for years to come. And God bless people who were on the front lines, being a doctor, trying to figure out how to do your profession and how to care for people. And it's just been so interesting to hear the many opinions that the medical community has. It wasn't like this, okay, well, do this.
And then I think it's also so difficult to to really count the death rates, because there are always, each year there's the seasonal flu that comes. There are pneumonia, to get. I mean, also the tests are not always accurate. if you have COVID or not. So there's there's probably a percentage that we don't know what they died of. I mean, there are always going to be people dying all the time.
Right. There are definitely issues with the tabulation. And we all know there's some kind of margin of error in all the data that we get. And definitely it got politicized, and all of these issues about if somebody had multiple illnesses,
Yeah.
did they get marked as a COVID because they also had COVID, but maybe it was one of those comorbidity factors. Yeah. So there's a lot of work for us in the world of public health globally. And then if you go down to any one country and then any one community, figuring out, learning from what happened, and hopefully better prepare ourselves going forward. Because as I understand it, this was not the first pandemic the world has known, and it's not likely to be the last.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some other things that you've noticed in your travels that are really different in terms of the laws, like talk about, say, marijuana.
Yeah.
What's the Swedish view on marijuana?
Well, I mean, it's for us, it's definitely a drug. It's to be considered, way worse than alcohol, way worse than cigarettes. It's more up there with heroin or cocaine, or it's it's definitely classified as a drug. And yeah,
With
it,
criminal penalties.
yes, with criminal
Yeah, you
penalties.
can wind up serving jail time. And
Yep.
yeah, because the US is going through a whole resurgence, and a lot of states now have really legalized it. Of course, here in California, we have legalization, but at the federal level, it's different. So it's a very complicated area of law in the US at the moment. But
Yeah, so that one is really different. And um, I know that, I mean, it does have some benefits, medical benefits as well. So it would be a shame if it's not used, for those purposes.
well,
But
can you in Sweden, like if you have glaucoma, can you get like any kind of a release for, or cancer? Apparently, it can help people with
um, a
side.
couple of years, yeah, a couple of years ago, I know I had a friend, and she was actually thinking of going to the black market to buy it for her grandmother, um, as treatment. So at that time, it wasn't, legal in that sense.
Because that's how it started here in terms of the legality. Is first it started opening up just for medicinal purposes,
Yeah.
and then it's opened up more for recreational use. Yeah. Um, so interesting. Yeah. I mean,
I think we're very black and white when it comes to yeah, drugs, because we do classify it like a drug, and also when it comes to weapons, carrying a knife, for instance. If you're a carpenter and it's your, for your work, yes, you're allowed, but otherwise it's an offense.
so and again, like in terms of gun carrying laws, open carry
Yeah.
laws, that's also hotly contested in the U.S. And we have a tragic problem with too many guns in the U.S. in my opinion. But
Yeah.
um, so there, you're saying no open carry. You definitely cannot have a gun. I mean, presumably the exceptions are made for uh,
Military, yeah,
military
police.
officers or
Yeah.
somebody, in the police, right?
Yes.
And talk to us about the military obligations there.
Yes, here it's mandatory for men. I actually did the military service voluntarily, um, and which, I mean, it's getting more and more common. I think also, even we are, you know, they're trying to get more women into the military as well, because you can see all the commercials are aiming at women as well. Um, but for me, it was definitely a challenge, as a former elite athlete. I thought it was, it was a great challenge, and you get to do things that you would never do in reality. Well, and when I say that, it's Sweden is usually we kept ourselves neutral when it comes to taking stands wars, yeah, around the world, and so we never see ourselves as getting into actual war if you don't join, let's say, an FN, uh, but. And more now it's more a training, and in the way that we use our military, it's also for rescue missions. If, let's say, if a child goes astray, or if there's an accident at sea, yeah, they tend to send out the military, because we're very efficient when it comes to those tasks. So it sounds also weird, but it's almost more like a game when you do the military, because we don't really take it seriously what we're preparing ourselves, what we're training for, because we are training for war. That is the purpose. But then when it all comes down to it, it's still very little chance that we would get sent out to war.
And so,
If that makes sense.
well, no, I understand. Yeah, because you're in there training and you're sort of thinking, okay, this is never going to happen. But it's kind of interesting. Now, you did it voluntarily, but if you hadn't done it voluntarily, you would have been required to do it?
No, because
No. What you're saying is
it's only men.
mandatory. Oh, it's mandatory for men.
Yeah.
And what if for men? How many years do you need to participate?
I think maximum, if you train yourself to be you know, an officer, then that would be a little bit longer, but nothing more than a year. I think now they have the basic training that's 3 months. So I think they are trying to get more people to do the military service. And yes, I know I said that it's mandatory, but still it's very easy to um, get away from that if you have any allergies, if you have any injuries like a bad knee, or if you really say that I do not want to carry a weapon, I do not want to participate in this, then usually they will let you off the hook.
And how long
So
did you do it?
I did it for a year because it's one of the best leadership trainings you can get.
Oh, I
It's
hear you.
very
I even here in the U.S., like you look at the ads and they have these really compelling ads around joining the Navy and belonging and getting a sense of belonging, and when you read their mission statements are so inspiring, and they definitely have the best of the best in terms of coaches and leadership training, and the soldiers and the Marines, the people I've had the privilege of meeting, there is something very special that they get out of their time in the service. They're all in there for a larger cause, right? It's
yeah,
not just for themselves, or for their families. They obviously they care about themselves and their families, and they're wanting to make the world safe for them, but it is a bigger mission. They're mission driven, so that's inspiring. I can see how you would want to do it. Okay, well,
so
definitely,
it's different.
yeah, but yeah. So if you had to handle a gun, you would be fine, though you're not allowed to have one now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, that is true. But I think it's actually like you said, you challenge yourself a lot of mentally as well. That I don't think that a lot of people that get into the military are really aware of at first, and they get surprised. All the challenges that you know that you have to face, getting awaken in the middle of the night, and you have to carry these big logs, and you don't know the reason why, and then you have to walk and walk and walk days and nights, and then you're wondering, when am I going to get food, am I going to get dry clothes, when am I going to sleep? I remember just sleeping uphill for, I think, 20 minutes. That was amazing. Then I had one of these big missions. Having a Snickers with you out on the field, that's like you can get a lot of money for that. you trade you trade a lot, and but it's really mental fitness. It's a really good to test yourself.
And plus all that teamwork, right? That whole taking care of the team, and that's great training as well.
And you associate with people that you have to get along, when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you're freezing, and with people that you wouldn't necessarily maybe not have in your life normally.
Right, just
So
a whole mix of just other
it's a
humans.
mix. Yeah. So I think
Your
it's
group
actually,
unit, men and women.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
it's
then
actually very
you
interesting.
are fluent in English, and so I'm so grateful for that, because this conversation would be really tough if we were trying to have it in Swedish. Because I know
Well,
there's changing subjects. You had shared a little bit about something called jante, which I'm probably
yeah,
mispronouncing.
jantelagen. Yeah, that's
Tell
the
us a little bit
law
about that.
of jante. This is extremely Swedish because it's all about not sticking out from the norm. You don't want to be, you know, underperforming, and you definitely don't want to be overachieving. Um, you always want to be somewhere in the middle, and you need to be humble. Never think that you're better than anyone else, and that you know better than anyone else. Um, and I think it's such a contradiction because if you are an elite athlete, you really have to believe in yourself.
Absolutely.
So we have produced some really good athletes over
Yes, you have.
the years. Bjorn Borg and all the ice hockey legends and so on. But yeah, I guess they don't really practice Jantelag there because you have to have a certain mindset to get there. I think it's nice to have that humbleness, and maybe that's also, yeah, I think always thinking that everyone has the same worth, um, and that no one should take up more space than anyone else. I think it's nice, but me coming to the US, I felt it actually very liberating. Um, just to being able to really live out uh, your full personality, so you could actually differentiate yourself from the herd, from the norm. um, and here we are a little bit more, I think, just in general, careful when it comes to risk taking as well. If you want to try something completely new, let's say quit your job and go for your passion, it maybe depends also where you are in the US, but people would generally go like, "Hey, yeah, you go, you can do this." Whereas here we would go like, "Are you sure you really want to do this? I mean, your life is already good. It's already set up. You always, you have this stable income. You have this. Yeah, you don't know if you're gonna succeed, so it's better to take the safe road."
It's such
So
interesting. You got to say something too about healthcare, just because your healthcare system is so different there.
it is different, and I think the good thing is that, yeah, if you're sick, it's part of the taxes that we pay.
Right.
So we're very used to, you just go to the doctor and you just get cared for, and that's it.
Yeah, you don't
That's
have people dying, having to declare bankruptcy because they can't
no,
afford medical bills, or people getting turned away from different hospitals. And maybe, yeah, no,
no,
we literally have people dying because they don't have any kind of coverage. And,
yeah,
um,
and
but
and that part
that's a
is,
broad
but
issue.
then
Yeah.
And it's a part of the high taxes. We have high taxes here. We pay at least 30% of our pay, that, and it pays for everything. I mean, it's healthcare. Yeah, so we do pay for school, but it's all in that tax money. We do
And
have a very
everybody
good
speaks all
infrastructure.
languages. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the infrastructure is also very developed. It's also tax money. So I mean, I think those decisions with our tax money, I mean, we as individuals, we don't get to make those decisions. That's what the government has made for us.
Right. Like as I'm saying, I don't, obviously people have differences of opinion in terms of how the taxes are spent and the benefits that you get. But some of them, it's just interesting because you've got years and years of course, everyone has healthcare. Healthcare is understood as a basic right. Not so here. Healthcare is not a basic right here in the US. And yeah, we do have lower, we have our corporations are paying no tax and people are paying differing degrees of tax, but it can be less than 30% for sure for many parts of the population.
Yeah.
Well, and then in your education, I was going to say, does most everyone speak a couple of languages or just part of the extraordinariness of you?
No, most of us speak. I mean, we're bilingual. I think it's due to all the television. We don't have any dubbed shows or anything. Everything is with subtitles. So yeah, we get to see the same shows as you do. So I think that's a part of it, of us learning English fairly quick at a young age.
And then I guess it's in the school you study.
Yes, it's in the school. I think we start when you're 10. It's mandatory, and then by the age of 13, you get to choose another language. It can usually it's German or French or Spanish. So,
well, I just saw the time is sort of a short show. We could go on forever. I was going to say,
yeah.
All that great vacation time you get. I know you have really made the most of it, and you've done quite a bit of travel and seen a lot of the world. And such an honor to get a chance to spend some time with you, Madeleine, as always. And I really appreciate you being on the show. Any final comments you want to make, or?
In final comments, I think that I mean, every system has its benefits. Like I said, I can see tons of benefits in the US. It depends on what kind of personality you have. If you have a family, if you want to raise a family, it's very beneficial. Maybe a little bit less stressful here. But it all depends on, I think, like as far as sticking out of the norm and really living your dream, I think that's a great thing that you guys have going for you. It's there's no perfect place, and at the end of the day, I mean, you have to make a perfect place in here.
Right. There are pros and cons, and we all have our own individual journey, and we're maximizing that. And yeah, we want to get it to where all people, all the world around are living their dreams. Right. We still have some more to go to facilitate that for one another, but it starts with shows like this. It starts with talking to each other. And again, I just thank you so very much for your time and sharing your life with us. And for listeners, again, I just want to point you to the World Children's Foundation. Check it out if you'd like to participate. And really hope it's been worth your while to join us on this conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to Vale La Pena. Please join us in making an impact together for people, animals, and the environment. Details in the show notes. You can find this show through my website at www.rebuslegal.com and on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. I'm your host, Cynthia Rebus, and I welcome and thank you for your feedback, comments, questions, and sharing this show with others.